Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Last time I promised you some reptile content and we are finally going to dive into that today, which is super exciting. I'm going to start a new little mini-series, or at least a series for as long as I can continue it, helping you guys get to know various reptile species. I'm obviously going to start by using the animals that I own, and we'll go through a number of species telling you about their care, about owning them as pets, and about their status and other things in the wild as well. Please note that just because you see an animal in my videos does not mean that you should run out and buy one for yourself. If you do find an animal that you think would fit your lifestyle and that you're interested in, I always will encourage you to do more research. I'm going to provide you with a little bit of base level stuff today, but there's always more to learn and there's always more to improve. Also, I'll be showing footage of my animals. Please note that there can be areas where I need to improve my care, and I am always continuing to learn. One of the things for my animals that I want to do once I am out of vet school is do even bigger cage upgrades. So I try to give them the biggest environment that I can with a lot of enrichment, but you can always go bigger in my opinion. So I'll try to address those as well, helping you guys get good ideal enclosure recommendations. But always remember, bigger is normally better, as long as you can use that large space to fill it with lots of enrichment and a lot of cage decor and different items to help your animals thrive in captivity. Okay, so the reptile of today's video is the Madagascar Giant Day Gecko, otherwise known as just the Giant Day Gecko. Scientific name is Felicima grandis. This arboreal diurnal day gecko is the largest of its species, or of its kind, ranging between 9 to 11 inches, with males being larger than the females. This day gecko species is a particular fan favorite for me and many around the world because most of them know this little guy as the Geico Insurance Gecko. I will give a little disclaimer, the Geico Gecko is not a giant day gecko. The reason why is because all giant day geckos have the characteristic red mask running from the tip of their nose to their eye. If they do not have this characteristic, they are not classified as a giant day gecko. Or, I guess if they are, they would just be one that has somehow bred out this distinctive red, which I have yet to see in the reptile hobby. That is what he's modeled after though, but not the case. I call foul. These geckos are incredibly active due to the fact that they're diurnal, which means that they are awake during the day. They also are pretty omnivorous, meaning that their diet consists of insects, so things in captivity that you might feed would be crickets, superworms, waxworms, dubias, hornworms, good variety there. And then they also can have pre-made fruit powder mixtures as well. Things like papayas, figs, bananas, all these things that have like the fruit mix that you might know as crested gecko diet. These geckos tend to absolutely love. Giant day geckos are relatively abundant in the reptile hobby. The main reason for this is due to them being captured from the wild. Now, giant day geckos, as they would, their other name would tell you, they do originate from Madagascar, but they have become invasive in other parts of the world, one of those being Florida. If you are interested in purchasing one of these geckos, they are often available at your local reptile expo, as well as often sold online, and even sometimes available at local reptile rescues. If you are going to an expo to purchase one of these animals, you might see a very low sell price, and that will kind of dictate to you that they are wild caught. Now, it is definitely hard to know if the animal that you're buying is wild caught from Florida, which would therefore be helping the situation by pulling out an invasive species, or potentially wild caught imported from their native area of Madagascar. You could always ask the seller, but it is high chance that they might not be sure where that animal is originating from. I typically don't recommend purchasing an animal that is wild caught due to the fact that they often have high stress loads due to being captured from the wild and put in a box and shipped to wherever you may be, due to also having high parasite loads, and they do tend to just have pre-existing wounds and other issues from being captured from the wild. If you are looking to purchase a giant day gecko, my overall recommendation for almost any reptile species would be to purchase from a captive breeder. Breeders tend to be able to know more about their animals, their hatch dates, parents. They'll know, who was paired with who, so any pre-existing health conditions. They also have a chance to work with that animal to help tame them down and make them more handleable and better used to humans. The giant day gecko itself is often not a species that people see as very handleable. There's many reasons for this, but one of the most common is that they do tend to slough out their skin when they feel like they are being attacked or if they're handled too roughly. This is something that has led people to think that giant day geckos are unable to be handled, but I definitely don't agree with this. I think that they can make great, wonderful pets as long as you're willing to put the time in and give them the space that they need to get comfortable with you. By giving these animals larger enclosures, it does help them to exhibit more natural behaviors, which is really important. I find that when reptiles are kept in too small of cages, they do tend to exhibit more stress-like behaviors, things like pacing, being more defensive, and being more restless overall. They don't tend to be able to just relax and have those moments where you can work on training with them. So let's talk about care for your giant day gecko. One of the most important things is getting them an appropriate sized enclosure. These geckos, due to being the largest of their species, do tend to require a larger amount of space. It is now being recommended that they do best in arboreal setups that are at least 120 gallons. While it may seem like a lot, and for most people it definitely might be for the space that they are occupying, these geckos will utilize all of that space. As with most reptiles, getting the bigger enclosure is always better, so I do recommend if you do purchase a baby of these animals, like a baby or a juvenile, do look forward to seeing what that future enclosure size is going to look like. There's mixed reviews online as to what is best, some saying 60-gallon talls are good, some saying if it's anything less than 120, it's abusive, so make sure you do your research and figure out what works best for you, but as always, I always recommend something bigger is always better. Okay, so let's talk more about the lifestyle and care of these geckos. Giant day geckos are known as diurnal, meaning that they are active during the day. These geckos are also incredibly active. Within their enclosures, you will often see them running around, jumping from branch to branch, and scaling the walls of their tank. Due to their specialized toe pads, these geckos are able to scale just about almost any surface, even glass. You will often see them sticking onto things like the glass and looking around at the world outside of their enclosure as they are incredibly inquisitive. This does mean though, if you are wanting to handle your gecko or if you need to move them from their tank to another container, that they are able to scale up any surface, like I said, including glass, meaning they can slip out and escape. These geckos are incredibly fast, so if you do happen to wish to handle one or you do need to move it, make sure you prepare yourself for what you're going to do to be able to get that animal back if they do decide to bolt off and out of your reach. Keep in mind that giant day geckos have a unique defense system, well, a couple defense systems, but the most notable being the fact that they can slough off their skin. So if your giant day gecko does get out, be sure to not grab and squeeze and grab onto them because you can elicit this response. They also are known for dropping their tails, which is a great defense mechanism from getting away from predators, but if you are trying to get them back in their enclosure, you're going to end up with a gecko with a nub-like tail. Or if you're trying to catch said gecko from running away, you're going to end up with just a gecko tail wiggling around in your hand and not have caught the gecko. These geckos have incredibly soft bodies, so if you do have to go ahead and capture one, do your best to not grab and squeeze on like before, because you can damage their internal organs, and this can lead to irreparable damage. Due to the fact that they are super fast, if you do need to get them out of an enclosure, one tip that I can recommend is wet down the glass and sides of the enclosure before you're going to go ahead and move your gecko. Even though they can scale glass, when the surfaces are wet, they tend to have a harder time being able to grip to those surfaces, and while this will not make them completely slow, it will definitely slow them down a little bit. Let's talk more about this animal's caging and decor. Due to the fact that this gecko is so active, it is recommended that you fill their cage with all kinds of enrichment items through all different kinds of decor. Some different options would be things like bamboo, mopani wood, and corkbark rounds. If you are going to go ahead and use corkbark rounds or anything that they can go ahead and get themselves up into, just make sure that the area does not contain anywhere that they would not be able to get out of. You don't want them getting stuck, as this can result in the death of your gecko. Corkbark rounds would be one of my favorite as they tend to not mold and they're able to withstand higher humidities. Speaking of, these geckos do require higher humidities. They are from, like I said, Madagascar and are thriving in Florida, so keeping up those humidities is definitely something that is needed to do. Some ways that you can do this would be daily misting of your cage, and normally you want to mist a couple times a day. This allows the humidity to peak and wane throughout the day, which is what would happen in the wild. If you don't want to be physically hand misting your cage multiple times, which can be a little bit of a task, you can go ahead and install a misting system. I have a misting system on my tanks and I definitely recommend it because it makes the chore of misting the cage super easy, and it also does allow for the animals to get a drink multiple times per day. Let's talk about lighting systems. Due to this gecko species being diurnal, meaning active during the day, they do require full spectrum UVB lighting. This means that while on top of your tank having some sort of just external light source, maybe an LED or just a grow light, you are required to provide UVB. Since these geckos hail from Madagascar and once again are thriving in Florida, the UV index tends to range between 3 and 4. And able to obtain this amount of UVB with this type of zone can result in a lot of health conditions, with the most notorious being metabolic bone disease. There are many different companies out there where you can get your UVB bulbs. One thing that I do highly recommend is having a UVB tester so that you can make sure that your bulb is still functioning. Bulbs tend to die in about 12 months, some can be shorter, but it all depends on the brand that you choose. For me personally, I've gone ahead and gone with the Arcadia light systems. I like how they're made, they tend to have really good durability, and their bulbs tend to last for about that 12-month range. But always make sure you're testing your bulbs and make sure that they are providing the correct UVB, and also make sure that just because you put a bulb on the top of your tank does not mean that that animal is getting the recommended range. By having the tester, you can go ahead and see what UV zone that area is sitting at, but you also have to make sure that you provide your animals with enough perching and other decor items so they can go ahead and bask underneath the light and get to the correct zone. If you also put it over mesh, this mesh does also cancel out some of the UVB rays. So just because you get a bulb that says that it will get your animal to the right UV index does not mean that it will be powerful enough to go through whatever is on the top of your cage. Another thing to be aware of when dealing with lights is that these light systems tend to heat up. While it is not great that they might be covered by mesh, you do want to make sure that they don't necessarily have direct access to the lights, as these lights can get very hot and might burn your animal. There are different light guards that you can put on that are able to keep your animal away from these the bulbs so that they won't get burnt. Just make sure, once again, that you're testing various areas of your enclosure and allowing that animal to get the correct UVB that it needs. You can go ahead and look up online the UVB requirements for the species that you have. Just make sure that you are providing that correct amount of UVB. Too much could potentially burn them, too little can give them health problems, such as metabolic bone disease. You want that perfect sweet spot of the correct amount of UVB that they need. If you do wish to breed giant day geckos, one interesting thing about them is they can live in monogamous pairs. I keep mine in a pair and they do really, really well together. It's actually funny, if I separate them, the one won't eat until it knows where the other one is, which is very sweet. It can make them feel more comfortable, but you always have to monitor for potentially fighting between males and females, or if you choose to keep a female group, just always make sure that the animals are getting along and aren't having any complications or issues being around each other. If you are planning on having more than one gecko, make sure that you increase the size of your enclosure, allowing for each gecko to get away from each other if needed. Additionally, when speaking about cages, the reason why you want to have a larger enclosure is that this allows the animal to better thermoregulate themselves. Giant day geckos do normally require supplemental heat, unless your house is sitting at 80 plus degrees, which most houses are not. Even still, the basking temperature for most giant day geckos is sitting around 95, so you will have to provide this with some sort of external heating source. If you are going to use an external heating source, such as with a light bulb, make sure that you do have that on some sort of thermostat, as these bulbs can malfunction and heat up to their max, which would cook your gecko. These geckos, as said before, are super susceptible to drying out, such as the reason why you need to mist them so often, giving them that high humidity. So you would hate to have your animal doing well just for your light to fail and then them get cooked. By providing a larger enclosure, you still will require some area to make sure that a certain area they can bask gets to 95, but having that larger enclosure allows them to move up and down throughout their different layers of their enclosure to pick the ideal temperature for them. My guys normally hang out around their heat light during the day, but tend to move away from it throughout the evening. Another thing that is super important for these geckos would be a proper day and night cycle. My gecko's lights stay on for about 12 hours, once again hanging out around the daytime since they are diurnal, but without extending into the night too often. I tend to keep my room on the rather dark side so they understand that once, downtime has happened or the nighttime has happened, that it is time for them to go to sleep. Without proper day-night cycles, these geckos can experience things like irritability, health problems such as not wanting to eat, and overall stress, which can be noticed by things like running around their cage, panting, and sometimes sitting at the bottom of their cage. I personally think that the Madagascar giant day gecko has a little bit of a bad reputation. They are often seen as unhandleable, unruly, and tend to be fierce biters. While anything with a mouth can bite, I think that these geckos are given a little bit of a bad reputation. They can be incredibly friendly, they can be incredibly personable. You just have to be able to spend time to work with them to be able to get them to tame down. One of the best ways that I recommend doing this is by doing tongue feeding. This is often done, or pretty much only done, with insects, but you can also take their powdered food, put it on some sort of little wooden stick or something like a tongue depressor, and you can hand it to them for them to lick off of the spoon or tongue depressor. Spending this time with your animals will help to show them that you are not a threat and instead help deliver them the good food which they love. For my geckos, I have two, so I've got my female here and I've got my male. My female here is relatively friendly. She doesn't love coming out, but she's willing to do it, whereas my male is not a fan. He often will still run and hide if he thinks that I am coming to take him out of the cage. It is important to be respectful of your animal's wishes. If they don't wish to come out of their cage, don't force them. The best way is to just help slowly introduce your hand into the enclosure, once again maybe by offering tongue feeding. Hold the tongs in one of your hands, your other hand out in the enclosure, and encourage the animal to step onto your hand in order to get the food. Giant day geckos are a relatively hardy species of gecko. They tend to live for about 15 to 20 years in captivity as long as provided with appropriate care. This makes sure just to remember you're feeding them a proper diet. If you are going to feed them insects, which you definitely should, make sure you're gut loading those insects so that they provide all the nutrients that your animal will need. Additionally, make sure you are keeping track of your lighting, as your UVB light will need to be changed every 12 months. Lastly, make sure you are misting your cage a couple times per day, so not only your animal can get a drink, but also maintain the humidity which they require. If they're not able to reach these humidity requirements, they can often have bad sheds, and they tend to become dehydrated rather quick. My last helpful tip would be making sure that you also monitor your heating devices so that they don't potentially overheat and cook your animal. While they do require, like I said, that higher temp, you want to make sure that you're not getting that temp too high, as it can result in death of your animal. I find personally that the giant day gecko is an incredibly hardy species. They tend to do really well with the different changes that I've had in my life, and they're not one to typically shy away and hide away. So they tend to be a great option if you're looking for an animal that You can see out in their cage throughout your day, being very inquisitive and jumping around, while also not necessarily being something that is super difficult to care for. As I stated before, if you are interested in purchasing a gecko, just make sure you always do your research, as things do tend to change, and we always want to make sure that we're providing the best for our animals. So that was just a little look at the Giant Day Gecko. If you guys are interested in purchasing a Giant Day Gecko, I do sell Giant Day Geckos on my Morph Market page. I will go ahead and link it in the description, but you absolutely do not have to get a day gecko from me. But you can go ahead and search online. Just make sure to try to get one from a captive breeder, as you will just overall have a better chance at being able to have a good lifelong companion. I hope you guys learned a lot today, and I hope that this video was helpful. With that said, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.